What is a power chord? If you are new to guitar, and especially rock guitar, this is essential. Power chords are the foundation of rock music. We've got to know them. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into power chords. We're going to look at how to play power chords, how to name power chords, and why they matter. So grab your guitar, let's break this down. So for starters, power chords are not actually chords. Chords, as we usually think of them, are triads, three-note chords stacked on thirds. A power chord has only two notes, and so this makes it an interval. And an interval is just two notes, and the distance from one note to another note, in this case, is a fifth. So a power chord is a fifth. It's a perfect fifth. If you would like to know more about intervals and what that means, I will link my video on intervals down below. But the fifth is significant because the third of the chord, when we are playing a triad, is the note that determines if the chord is major or minor. Power chords remove the third, which means they're neutral. They're just fifths. They're neither major or minor. And this is why when you look at chord charts, power chords are written with a 5 after the letter name. So it will say A5, D5, G5, E5. Those are power chords, neither major or minor. So now that we know what a power chord is, how do we play one? Here's what I want you to do. Take your first finger and place it on the 5th fret of the low E string. Okay, that's the note A. Then we're going to take our third finger and stretch up to the 7th fret on the A string, the next string down. That's the note E. Play those two strings together, and we have a power chord. There it is. That's an interval of a fifth right there. Now, notice my thumb is behind the neck. You do not want to play power chords with your thumb here. That would be bad news, okay? That's going to put a lot of unnecessary stress on our wrists. That's going to make them very uncomfortable to play. Keep your thumb behind the neck, straight up and down, more or less aligned with your first finger. That will give you the most success when you're playing power chords. Now, it's also common to add our pinky right below our third finger on the D string. Okay, so now we've got our first finger, 5th fret, low E, third finger, 7th fret, A, and then pinky, 7th fret, D. So now we have 3 notes. Now you may be thinking, 3 notes, does that give us a triad now? Well, it's still considered a 2-note chord because the low note and the high note are both A's. So those are octaves of one another. They cancel each other out. So this is still considered just a fifth. It's still considered a 2-note power chord, but it has 3 strings to thicken it up a little bit. So that's common, either 2 strings or 3 strings. So power chords can be played all over the neck. We can play them on the high frets. We can play them on the low frets. We can play them on the high strings. We can play them on the low strings. But the most common kinds of power chords are rooted on the low E and on the A string. So we've got this power chord that we just learned here. This would be rooted on the low E, meaning that the lowest note in the chord is the low E string. If we take each finger and we move each finger down one string, then we've got a power chord that's rooted on the A string. Okay, so now my first finger is on the A string. Third finger is on the D string. We're not going to play the low E with this chord. We're just going to pick those two. Those would be the 2 most common kinds of power chords. Now, here's what's so cool about these chords. Okay, if you can play this shape that we already learned, how do you play other power chords? You simply move it around. Okay, so check this out. Right? Those are all power chords. The shape stays the same. The shape meaning that the shape of my hand here does not change. I simply move this around to different frets and I get different power chords. Same thing on the A string. Okay, if I'm here, I can just move this and I get all different power chords there. Very cool. So you learn 2 shapes and you can play power chords all over the neck of the guitar. Now, I would encourage you to know what the name of every power chord that you play is. Now, how would you do that? Well, the name of the chord is whatever our first finger is playing. Okay, so like when I'm here, this note is A, that makes this an A power chord or an A5. If I move everything down a string, now my first finger is here, 5th fret on the A string, which is the note D, that makes this a D5 or a D power chord. This is the note F sharp, so that is an F sharp 5. This is the note E, so that is an E5, and so on. So take the time to learn where the notes are on the low E string and where the notes are on the A string, and you'll know the names of all the power chords. So why are power chords so popular? Why are these chords universal, especially amongst rock musicians? Why is it that they are so commonly used? Well, it has to do with distortion. You'll notice for today's video, I'm using a distorted sound on my guitar, right? And that is intentional. That is intentional because most commonly, power chords are used in a context where distortion is being used. To understand why these are so helpful, I think it's best to just listen. When you play a chord that has a lot of open strings in it, like the sort of thing you would use on an acoustic guitar frequently, something like this. Okay? When you play that with a lot of gain, with a lot of distortion, it ends up sounding really muddy. And that's because the notes are closer together, because we have that third in there. And so that sort of a chord doesn't work as well with a lot of heavy gain. Whereas this tends to sound sharper, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit even cleaner sounding. I don't mean that in a tonal sense, but just it's not as muddy sounding. So what I want you to do is listen to this. I'm going to play G, D, E minor, C with open chords. Okay, so big acoustic open chords with a lot of gain on the guitar. I want you to listen to that. And then I'm going to play these as power chords. I want you to hear the difference. Okay, here's with power chords. Pretty cool, right? You can hear that the power chord definitely sounds better in a high gain setting than the big open chords do. This is why so many rock bands rely on these chords, and this is why if you want to play rock music, you've got to know the power chord. So I hope that this video has been helpful in detailing these chords. As always, I hope you have a wonderful time making music, and I will see you next time.